Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance, but as He who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, since it is written, "You shall be holy, for I am holy."
I've been listening and digesting a lot of a teaching from a guy named Ravi Zacharias this week. He's an apologist. He's a defender of faith. I mean, don't get caught at a lunch table with him. He wrote something I want to read to you about the state of our culture. Now, he's got a wide vocabulary, and I want you to try to follow the flow of this thought. It's a little long, but it's titled, it's from his book, "Can Man Live Without God?" And it's an excerpt about the state of our culture. It starts with the idea of man and what man believes in. We believe in Marx, Freud, and Darwin. We believe everything is okay as long as you don't hurt anyone to the best of your definition of hurt and to the best of your knowledge. We believe in sex before, during, and after marriage. We believe in the therapy of sin. We believe that adultery is fun. We believe that sodomy is okay. We believe that taboos are taboo. We believe that everything's getting better despite the evidence to the contrary. The evidence must be investigated, and you can prove anything with evidence. We believe there's something in horoscopes, UFOs, and bent spoons. Jesus was a good man, just like Buddha, Muhammad, and ourselves. He was a good moral teacher, though we think his good morals were bad. We believe that all religions are basically the same, at least the one we read was. They all believe in love and goodness. They only differ on matters of creation, sin, heaven, hell, God, and salvation. We believe that after death comes nothing, because when you ask the dead what happens, they say nothing. If the death's not the end, if the dead have lied, then it's compulsory heaven for all, except perhaps Hitler, Stalin, and Khan. We believe in Masters and Johnson. What's selected is average, what's average is normal, and what's normal is good. We believe in total disarmament. We believe there are direct links between warfare and bloodshed. Americans should beat their guns into tractors, and the Russians would be sure to follow. We believe that man is essentially good. It's only his behavior that lets him down. This is the fault of society. Society is the fault of conditions. Conditions are the fault of society. We believe that each man must find the truth that is right for him. Reality will adapt accordingly. The universe will adjust. History will alter. We believe that there is no absolute truth, except the truth that there is no absolute truth. We believe in the rejection of creeds and the flowering of individual thought. If chance be the father of all flesh, disaster is his rainbow in the sky. And when you hear state of emergency, sniper kills 10, troops on rampage, whites go looting, bomb blasts school, it is but the sound of man worshiping his maker. Well, culture without God is nothing but confusion, obfuscation to the truth. That is a vivid picture of what it means to be lost. Peter says, well, God says, you are holy. You are holy because He is holy. This comes from Leviticus Not a direct quote, but the idea of Leviticus is that a holy God is calling the people of Israel holy. And Peter applies this to you. You are holy because he is holy. What does it mean to be holy? What is the definition of holiness? Now, I brought this up several months ago, and I used the idea of water and the idea of separating, sanctioning water, pulling water aside, right? Water isn't holy because of the source it comes from. It's because of its designated use. As I was encountering this word holy this week, the word sanction kept coming up. Right? We have an idea of sanction and what it means because of its negative connotation in our culture today as we sanction countries from our economic blessings or trade that we may do with them. Right? We set them aside in order not to do some type of trade or business. This idea of sanction, but the word sanction is actually a Latin word. I want to read. It comes from the Latin word sanctio. It's a law or decree that is sacred or inviolable. You can't break it. This noun is related to another Latin verb, sounds very similar, which basically means to render sacred or inviolable by a religious act. You see the word holy and the word sanction, we get our word sanctuary, is synonymous to it. I want to use 3 picture illustrations to define the word holy, because God has called you holy. This is significant in how you view yourself and the meaning to your life. What does the word holy mean? I want to start with this picture, what we did a few months ago, of what we call, or what has been called, holy water. All right, I don't use the term holy water, but you probably have heard it, holy water. What makes water holy? Is it purified, multiple times through reverse osmosis? I mean, did it come from the Culligan man? What makes water holy? It's none of that. Okay, so I was in Miss Jackson, Mississippi as a youth pastor at a small PCUSA church, very traditional church. And inside the sanctuary was a lot of interesting looking furniture, like the thrones that the king and the queen sat on and the big pulpit. And the choir seating in the back, and then there was this pedestal that had what looked like a silver bowl in it that was corroding, so it wasn't real silver, and that would hold the water that they would use to sprinkle the infants. Now, one weekend, being the youth pastor, I invited about 200 teens to come run through our building that could hold about 100 people. And I said to the pastor, we're going to have this teen group come out and destroy the church. We'll put it back together when they're done. And he said, that's fine. I mean, really great pastor. He caught the vision. I said, great. What we need to do is get rid of all this furniture. No. That was a no. He stopped me right there and said, Greg, you do whatever you want. You do not touch the furniture. I said, well, the holy water's in the way. The king and the queen's throne is really taking up space. And he said, listen, I don't care what you do. You're not moving the furniture an inch. And I didn't get it. In my ignorant ways of my past, I fought him. I said, look, it's going to burn in the end, just like this building will. He said, Greg, you're not touching the furniture. I said, now, in my biblical studies, I am a sophomore at Belhaven. I'm getting my undergraduate degree in Bible. I know this building and that furniture will burn. That water may turn to steam. What's the big deal? He says, you ain't touching it. You really didn't have a defense. But I realized today what was going on. It was holy to him. That furniture, that building was sanctioned for a purpose. The word holy means to be set aside for a purpose. That's what makes it holy, the purpose. You see, if I walked up to the holy water and I mixed my lemonade packet in it and I started drinking it, I violated its holiness. The sanctity of the water has now been polluted. If I went up with my rubber ducky and started splashing around, I violated the holiness of the water. If I used that water for anything other than it was set aside for, I violate the sanctity of that water. It is now polluted. Same with that furniture. And this is where this pastor's faith led him. And that was okay. I should not have violated his faith. And I've come to realize today. In fact, we'll get into Romans 14 and work on this. I want to talk about holiness and what it means, how you become holy, your participation in it, and then apply it to your lives as we pull out the end. Holy water is declared holy because of its intended and set aside purpose. Okay? Illustration 1. Illustration 2. I want to go to the Old Testament and talk about Solomon's temple. If you don't know Solomon's temple, let me walk you through it. Some of you know it. You know about the inner chambers. Let's talk about Solomon's temple for a moment. There was an outer court, an inner court. There was a place called the holy place, and then there was the Holy of Holies. Okay? The outer court was where everybody could gather and come together. The inner court was reserved for the Jews. The holy place was reserved for the priest and the priest only. No Jews, no common people could enter the holy place. And the Holy of Holies, the most inner part of the chamber of the temple, was reserved for God. And the high priest could visit once a year for one specific purpose: to atone for the sins of the common people. The holy place was set aside for the religious acts that God deemed, in Leviticus, in Exodus, Leviticus, that the Levites were supposed to perform as God was in their presence. That was reserved only for the priest. But the Holy of Holies, this is interesting. You read Hebrews and you see, if you can see that picture live, you may not be able to see that picture real well online, but you could Google an image of Solomon's temple and see something very similar. What you're seeing is a picture of the heavenlies, the heaven place, where God dwells. And Hebrews talks about this, that this was a picture of the dwelling place of God. And as you move through the temple and you get more to the heart, you could say the soul of the temple, there was this special place inside where God lived. In fact, his cloud would come down over the Holy of Holies and you knew God's presence was there. The high priest went in at the risk of his own life. If he was found not acceptable in God's sight, he would lose his life. The high priest would go in and he would have a bowl of blood. And separating the holy place from the Holy of Holies was this massive curtain that declared no one allowed in except the one person. And the high priest would go in and he would go inside, and I've heard he would have a rope tied to him in case he did die and they could pull him out. And then he would go in there and he would just throw blood on everything. On everything. And every year after year, the blood accumulated. It was a bloody mess. But this was needed for the atonement of the sin of the Israelites. Fast forward 1,500 years and you have Jesus Christ on the cross. His blood is dripping from his body. And at his death, that curtain that separated the Holy of Holies from the holy place was torn in two. And God would no longer be found there. Never again to be found in a structure made by human hands. He packed his bags and he moved. And John 14 tells us where he moved to. Jesus says to his disciples, "My Father and I are coming to make our home in you." Okay, if you can understand the sacredness of the Holy of Holies, you begin to get a glimpse at the sacredness of your new life. Because the great high priest paid a price for the Father in him and the Spirit to live in there. You are now the new temple of the living God, cloaked in flesh that will fail one day. Your life bound up in a new holy place. You are holy because he is holy. And he lives in you, therefore making you holy. You have been set aside, sanctioned for a very specific purpose. It's not to pay the bills. It is to be the home of God. Your life has meaning. You wake up in the morning, and if this populates your mind and you understand what it means, this will give you drive every day. I'm alive because God wants to live with me. Because God needs a place to dwell. I need a place to dwell. But specifically, Paul talks about you being the temple. Peter is saying this in his own way. You are the new Holy of Holies. I want to go to a third example and talk about this church building and the layout of this church building. What does it mean to be holy? What is holy? You walk into the lobby, and we have one side of the building is dedicated to our children ministry. If you do not have kids and you're not a volunteer, good luck getting past the mama bears. Our volunteers have that place on lockdown. Our security systems are far beyond Safe Touch and Simply Safe and whatnot. We have the Lord and a lot of our volunteers guarding those kids. They're not going to touch them over their bodies. I guarantee it. But that is sanctioned for our children. It is set aside for a very specific purpose, and we do not want people entering it that do not belong in there because they violate the holiness of those rooms. All right, the sanctity of those rooms. They are reserved for, and if you like to become a volunteer, you got to get through our background check. And then if you get through our background check and you're a male, you will not be left alone back there. I mean, so those rooms are set aside for a specific purpose. And you're here in what we would call our place of worship, our sanctuary, a room sanctioned for worship. Now, we will use this room for other things, right? So I don't have the same view as my pastor from Belhaven, and that's fine. And I don't want to violate his view or his faith. My view on this room is that it's a tool. It's as useful as a napkin. It can go away tomorrow and the church will be fine. And our holiness will not be violated. What makes this room holy are the people in this room. What makes this room have purpose is that God is found here, not because of the walls, but because the Holy of Holies is here. His very presence dwelling in my midst through you all. If you can see what he says to you in 1 Peter, that you are holy, guys, the meaning to your life changes. God wants and needs a place to live. He's chosen you. He chose you before the world was created. In fact, his desire to be with you is so great, he paid a price that is hard to comprehend. And many people will call evil. He crucified his own son because the blood had to pour out to wash you and cleanse you of your unholiness so he can move in. The only way he can be in you and live with you is if the sanctuary has been cleaned. We often use the word sanctification, sanctifying, being made clean, matured. It's a process that we see in our flesh. We'll talk a little bit about it here in a few minutes. But you have been sanctified. Your life is sacred. The God of the universe, your creator, has taken up residence within your soul. It is your new life. Now let me go to 1 Peter, all right? And we've laid a foundation of what holiness is. Your holiness. You set aside for a very specific purpose. And that purpose, the house and home of God. That's actually, hold on. That sounds slightly shallow, not in the sense of, intellectually talking, but shallow in the sense of purpose. I exist just to be a structure. In the beginning was Sarah, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh. Boy, now I'm running off of us. And dwelt among us. He was the life and light of man. Your very existence is the life of God. Now, you're not just a structure. You're not just a tent. You're not just mortar and brick because the divine need a place to live. You are the life of God and yours infused together. Never to be separated. This is what makes you eternal. The only way for your eternity to end is for God himself to end. And it'll never happen. Your life will go on forever. The flesh will die. It needs to. It needs to go away for you to see what you have become and are becoming. 1 Peter 1 verse 8, we're going to back up because he does use the word therefore in verse 13. So let's jump back into where we were several months ago. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Why do you love him? You don't see him. You don't see God. You don't see Jesus, yet you love him. Though you do not now see him, you believe in him. You lunatics? No, it's faith. You know he's alive. You know he's real. And you know it because you're alive. Because you have faith, and that faith comes from a place that is rooted in truth. You've seen the truth. He is your light, the light of man. You see the path. You're walking in it. Your faith leads you to love him, to believe in him, and rejoice with a joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory. It's filled with significance. Your joy, your life is filled with significance and purpose. You're obtaining the outcome of your faith. You're obtaining, which is not, it's not the life in the sense of the car you drive, the job you have. Yeah, man, God may bless you in many ways like that. But obtaining the outcome of your faith is the salvation of your souls. It is your new life. Concerning this salvation, the prophets who prophesied about the grace, about the favor that was to be yours, searched and inquired carefully. Why? They inquired what person or time the Spirit of Christ in them, the Spirit of Christ in these, the Spirit of who? Christ in these Old Testament prophets. Just don't let that fly by you. The Spirit of Christ in them was indicating when he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the subsequent glories. Verse 12, it was revealed to them that they were not serving themselves, but you. They spoke. The Old Testament prophets, you have them. You have Jeremiah, you have Isaiah, you have Malachi, you have Nahum. They spoke because of you. They wanted to let you know there's something great coming. And the things that you have that are being announced to you right now through those who preach the good news to you by the Holy Spirit, sent from heaven. This is the good news of the gospel. God needs a place to live. He's found a place to live. He's paid the price for that place, and he's moved in. Believe in him. Angels long to look into what you know, what you're hearing this morning, but they don't have the capacity, the faculties to hear and understand. They're not in your place. Verse 13, therefore preparing your minds for action. Prepare your minds for action, being sober-minded. It's NFL season. I'm going to try to squeeze some in. We got cable just to watch the Lions suffer. It's awful first game. I almost cried. It's terrible. They wear tights. I mean, not tights, but they don't have flowy clothes, right? You don't watch the NFL play in their pajama pants. Just want to work, right? The clothes hanging off would give the enemy, the opponent, something to grab onto and pull down. This idea of preparing your mind is literally gird up your loins. It literally means tuck in the robe. It's get rid of the distractions. Prepare your mind for action. Guys, I read you that excerpt because this world is full of distractions. There is no absolute truth. Yet that statement is an absolute truth. So therefore, you deceive yourself and you stand in confusion by declaring there's no absolute truth, by making an absolute truth statement, thus deceiving your own self. we have to prepare our minds for action. We have to be sober-minded. We have to think, how do you do this, though? How do you do this? You set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you. This is how you prepare your mind for action. You set your hope not on how much money you may have next week, not on paying the bills, not on the car that you might buy or the loan you may pay off, not by the job you may get, not by what your kids may do in life. Your hope cannot be set on anything in this world. It's too fluid, it's unpredictable, it's chaotic, and it's darkness. Your hope, what is hope? Man, it's like the foundation of your future that you trust in. It's like, I see my life going there. That's what I'm aiming for. Yet in our culture, in our world, the future is constantly changing based upon what people believe to be true and not true. Go check out the bathrooms in North Carolina. Our God never changes. It's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He says, set your hope on him. You wake up in the morning, and what should flood your mind is the knowledge of the fact that, man, I will see Jesus face to face. The exact words are, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you. This will happen. There is no change in that future. You will one day realize the favor of God upon your life, how much he likes you and how much he loves you. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former... Man, don't let this verse trip you up, because you read as obedient children and some of your minds probably go to, man, for my child to be obedient, I have to whip them into submission. He's not telling you to be an obedient child. He's using as obedient children as a simile. It's an example. Your child, my 6-year-old, she very obedient. She has no former way of ignorance to fall back on until she sins, until she commits disobedience. But up to this point in life, all she knows is when dad speaks, I act. She doesn't know anything else. There's no former ignorance there. There's no former rebellion or disobedience until she crosses the line and disobeys, and now she begins to form a memory of disobedience and ignorance that she can begin to fall back on. And yet, I am blessed to have 2 incredible children. And kind of in a life experiment, I believe if I love them as a father and their mom loves them as a mother, and we are rooted in the love of God, that I don't have to worry about her forming a life of ignorance and rebelling. The times of rebellion will come, but my child will be okay because she knows she's loved. She's 6. I've got 12 more years to go. I'll let you know how it works out. But I've got a feeling, the more I know the love of my Father and my Father in heaven, the more I want to be under him. The more I want to be under his order. So far, it seems to work out. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passion of your former ignorance. I love how he words it. You were ignorant in your ways. You didn't know. It was the passion, which we see in James, that word passion. This is a desire you have for life. A desire that is motivating and pushing you to find life. And in your ignorant ways, former ways, before Christ, we're not talking about when you're 8, 9, 10. This was before you knew Christ, before you came to the knowledge of the truth. Could have been yesterday. You did things to find life, to find God, that were out of your ignorance. He says, don't be conformed to that anymore. You now know something different. You know something much better. As he who called you is holy, you also be holy in your conduct. The word conduct is behavior. The things you do. This is he who called you. He called you. He pulled you out of the darkness and you responded. You had no other choice. Neither did you want to fight it. When you heard his voice, I read this an article this morning on Elizabeth Smart. I don't know, she's been popping up in the news here and there, and about her abduction back in 2002. And when she was found, she was scared to death to tell the officers her name because of all the threats made against her life and her family's life. And so when the officers came up, it was reported it took 40 minutes for her to say, "I'm Elizabeth." So just shortly before they found her, Elizabeth and her captors and were walking through Walmart, and she saw on the wall the missing child, and she was looking for her name to see if anybody cared. And her captor grabbed her by the shoulder, dug his nails in, and says, "They don't care about you anymore. You are mine forever." And the way he grabbed her shoulder, she said the pain was so immense because he just sunk his nails in. A little bit later on, they're walking from that Walmart, and the first police car pulled up, and then the second, the third, the fourth. They came out, questioned the man, and they pulled her aside, and she said, the police officer set his hand on my shoulder. She said, "I just instinctively knew it was a touch of care. I was safe." But the fear still was there. When he calls your name, and you hear it, it's as if you feel a different touch on your shoulder. A touch of care, a touch of love, somebody really, really cares about me, wants to be with me. He who called you is holy. He says, now you be holy in your behavior. What does that mean? What you do in this life needs to be sanctioned for a specific purpose. I read the story this week. A social eruption occurred on the campus of an American university. The nature of the case was so serious that it was necessary for the president of the institution and his counsel to handle it. In reply to a personal question, so there was this issue on a campus, all the students rebelling, the president steps in. One of the top students of the rebellion snapped, "Sir, I'd wager that there are not 10 men on the campus who wouldn't have done exactly what I did under the same circumstances." Whereupon the president replied, "Young man, has it occurred to you that you might have been one of those 10? You see, Sodom and Gomorrah could have been saved by just 10 holy individuals. That you see that God has called you because He wants to live with you. You are His home. So your behavior, your flesh, James talks a lot about this. We're just hearing in different words, is now brought under the order, right? Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, he will flee from you. In other words, be holy in your conduct. Sanction your behavior as something that is so precious. We do not even want to violate what we do in this life because God is found within us, and He roots it, since it is written, "You shall be holy, for I am holy." You are set aside for a specific purpose. The call is for you now to be holy in your behavior. See your behavior, the words, the things you do in this life, as being sanctioned for a purpose. Summarize the purpose up in 3 words: love, mercy, and justice. The love of God and your neighbors. Mercy, which is almost synonymous to love of God. You see the afflictions of others and you are drawn to help them. And justice, standing up for what is right. I want to, just a couple things real quick. Andrew Murray said, "Nowhere can we get to know the holiness of God and come under His influence and power," he says, "except in the inner chamber. It has been well said, no man can expect to make progress in holiness who is not often and long alone with God." So a couple years back, this old man kept calling the church. I didn't know he was old until I met him. He just called the church every day. And I don't mean old. Old is not a derogatory term. It really isn't. Hipsters might be. He called the church, it felt like every day. And he said, I need to meet with the pastor. I've got a question, right? Every young pastor wants to be called out of the blue and be told, you're God, answer my question. I got to take the bait. I said, no, I'm too busy in life. I got to prioritize. I've got my church. I got my personal family first and foremost. I've got my church family second. And then I've got myself I've got to take care of. And then I will have, if I got time for others out there, I'll go. If I don't prioritize, then my family won't be healthy, you won't be healthy. And it sounds kind of, at times I say no to people. What kind of pastor are you? But it's for the sake of you all, for my family. He called and called and called. I've got a question. I said, Brittany, I need to know the question before I meet with them. We just read some article or news story about how some guy came in and shot up the church and whatnot. And then, we weren't white, American pastors aren't, top on the most loved list. I just didn't want to put myself out there. You don't know what this guy has in store. And he says, well, I got a question about the Holy Spirit. I said, Google it. And, lots of answers out there. He didn't take that bait either. He says, no, I need to talk to you. I got a question about the Holy Spirit. I got a question. 2 months went on. He finally wore me down. So I called the elders up at the time, and I said, you're coming down with me. He's going to be at the elder meeting. If I'm going down, we're all going down together. Maybe we could jump him if things got violent. Well, then he showed up, and he looked like he was a sincere man. And a God-ordained appointment. Now I'm going to listen. He's there in front of me. Time to listen up. He pulled out a sheet of paper, and he just started reading. And if I could summarize it, it was this. Spend time with God. Spend time with God. So, but at the end, I said, well, so what's your question? He said, well, what do you think about that? I said, man, you tricky. He said, I got a whole list of churches, man. There's 2 left. You're hard to crack. Well, I got to you. He was sent by God to go tell these pastors, spend time with God. And it was something that actually walked away thinking, he's absolutely right. I need to spend time in the Holy of Holies. I need to spend time in the inner chamber. Look, man, a lot of you want this church to grow, don't you? I've been told if we put different color feather flags out front, new people might show up. I've been told if we put a donate button online, we might get more money and Joyce will reverse an aging. I guess I can't do it. I just can't do it. And I told the staff last Monday, and they all good intentions and whatnot, I can't do it. It violates something in me. And I've come to realize, no, man, you're the holy place. You're the Holy of Holies. God is in this midst. We don't need feather flags. Maybe one day we'll put some more color out there or something. What we need to know is who we are and what this church is about. We are a small church family on the side of Wickham Road that gathers every Sunday morning because God is found within us and inside our children. And we come to celebrate that and worship that. I want to close with one more quote and then read to you Romans 14 and challenge you on something. Charles Spurgeon says, in proportion as a church is holy, in that proportion will its testimony for Christ be powerful. I would rather spend my time and my dollars on teaching you who you are, not on branding, nothing against branding. But if I've got limited time and limited resources, we do too, I want to spend it on teaching you the truth. You come to the knowledge of your salvation and you begin to conduct your life in a way that is holy. Just watch what God will do. Don't worry about the seats. Don't worry about the dollar. Just watch what God does in your life. You will begin to see the good. It may be in your inner chamber, in your inner circle. It may never infiltrate in this church, but I got a feeling it will. We will all be blessed by it. Romans 14 says this. It says, therefore, let us not pass judgment on one another. All right, Eric. Eric said, you got to preach another sermon on judgment. I get in your old marital disputes about the sermons. Therefore, let us not pass judgment on one another any longer, but rather decide never to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of a brother. What is the stumbling block he's talking about? I know and am persuaded in the Lord Jesus that nothing is unclean in itself, but it is unclean for anyone who thinks it's unclean. Paul says, in my holiness, I see things as holy, but in your holiness, you see certain elements as unholy. For you to consume in that time a certain food or celebrate or not celebrate a certain tradition could violate your holiness. You see, faith is that curtain that has been, it's been ripped open, and it's now that inner chamber, that doorway that leads us back and forth to the holy place. You can't say faith is that curtain. It's the stumbling blocks that erect that curtain back up. And it prevents us. That doubt creeps into our minds. Does God love us? Do I need to do this? And that doubt begins to shut down the holy place and our access to it. But your faith, your trust in God is what opens it wide up for you to go back and forth. And I am called not to tell you to move the furniture because it'll burn one day. I erected the curtain. I put it back up for my pastor back in the day. No, I need to tear it down. And Paul says, don't put in these stumbling blocks. For if your brother is grieved by what you eat, you're no longer walking in love. By what you eat, do not destroy the one for whom Christ died. Do not destroy the one for whom Christ tore down that curtain. So do not let what you regard as good be spoken of as evil. What you regard as holy be spoken of as unholy. What is sacred to you, right? We got the gospel. Christ died. He covered your blows. You believe in him. But you've got an inner chamber. And it's set up the way God wants it to be set up in your life. Do not for the sake of food destroy the work of God. Everything is indeed clean, but it is wrong for anyone to make another stumble by what he eats. It is good not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything causes your brother to stumble. So my encouragement to you, my church family, is we all have this Holy of Holies. By our faith, belief in God, we prove that the presence of God lives within us. We all have different shades of curtains that have been torn down. We all have a story. We all have a unique journey that God has used to call us to him. Do not take your curtain that's been torn down and put it back up for someone else. It may be a challenge to you as you see others and they wrestle and struggle in their faith. Yes, there is a line to where we judge. We call out the evil, the one who has left the temple, and they are playing in a field that they don't belong in. But at the same time, we don't put curtains back up. And those curtains, I'm using synonymous as doubt, causing each other to doubt. It's not love, Paul says. It's not love. The proportion of your holiness